This is a spoiler warning. The following video will contain spoilers for Doctor Who Arachnids in the UK. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, go and watch it now, and then come back here later. In broad terms, Arachnids in the UK was both a fun, family-friendly romp and a creepy urban thriller, with some quite prominent political overtones. Its central premise is simple: invasion of the spiders. It starts off as a mystery, with some creepy moments as the spiders are revealed, first in the flats and then the hotel, before they're defeated in the final act. There's more to this episode than the simple synopsis, however. As well as providing an edgy urban backdrop, the contemporary setting grounds it with political subtext that gives this story an extra layer of meaning. The main way Chibnall achieves this is through the character of Robertson, a blatant caricature of Donald Trump. For the second week in a row, the real villain comes in the form of the bigoted white American male, though this time he's from 2018 and not 1955. As well as serving as a one-episode baddie of the week for the kids to hate, he's a representation of extreme, right-wing views. This was seen most prominently at the end of the story, when he argued passionately about the importance of guns, before proceeding to shoot the giant spider. He's also a businessman, a capitalist, unwilling to face the consequences of his actions, or take responsibility for them. He doesn't care if his hotel's a botched job, as long as it's making him money. This aspect in particular reminded me of the Grenfell Tower incident. It's another case of the corners cut in the building process having significant repercussions further down the line. Of course, this episode condemns Robertson and his selfish values, portraying him as extremely absurd and distasteful. Now this works to a certain extent, but at times I thought his character was a little too exaggerated, and Chris Noth's fairly hammed up performance was just a bit too camp. I often found it hard to take Robertson seriously, though maybe that's the point, since the same thing could be said about the person he's based on. Overall though, I thought they slightly overstepped the mark with this character. Some of his dialogue was clunky, forced, and just pure unrealistic, even for a caricature of Trump. He felt like more of a caricature than a fully rounded character, and because he was so similar to Trump, he came across as quite stereotypical. I appreciate what Chibnall was trying to do with this character, but on the whole, he didn't quite work for me. I bet the kids loved him though. He's the perfect panto villain. As well as these anti-right-wing, anti-Trump ideas, I think there's a wider message to take away from this episode. The mutation of the spiders is ultimately down to the human characters. Robertson, his workers, and the scientists at the zoology lab are all, inadvertently, responsible. It's somewhat ironic that human error is at the root of something that we, as humans collectively, feel so fundamentally threatened by: spiders. Take Robertson, for example, who suffers from arachnophobia and is scared of the spiders in the story, yet the reason for their mutation is, indirectly, down to him. The spiders represent the consequences of his actions, quite literally coming back to bite him on the bum. I think there's a suggestion that we, as humans, are in some way responsible for the things we fear, and that through our actions we can control our external and internal demons. Or perhaps that's reading too much into it. There's also a link to environmental ideas. The ecosystem in Sheffield has been heavily tampered with, and the mutation of the spiders is a side effect. They are collateral damage, victims. We even end up feeling sympathy for them. To start with, however, the spiders are monsters, and I thought in this respect they were handled brilliantly. It's another example of the show taking something very ordinary and making it 10 times scarier than it was before, tapping into a primal fear that lots of us are familiar with. I thought the CGI work looked very realistic. At times I was questioning whether what I was seeing was a computer-generated spider or a real-life model, which can only be a good thing. Other aspects of this story fell slightly flat in my eyes. As others have pointed out, the plot is a little over-reliant on coincidences. I wouldn't say this is a major issue. It didn't get in the way of my enjoyment of the story, but I recognise that some parts of the plot were just a little bit too convenient. It just so happens that Yaz lives next door to the spider-infested flat, and that her mum manages the same hotel that the spiders originated from. The ending too seemed convenient, and it wasn't really made clear what happened to the spiders once they'd been locked away, let alone the spiders still locked in Anna's flat. It also felt, at times, like there were too many characters and they weren't all getting enough screen time. Counting the 4 regulars, plus Robertson, Jade and Yaz's mum, there were 7 main characters in the hotel scenes. They were split up effectively at times, allowing for some nice character moments, but nevertheless, I think some of the side characters ended up suffering and feeling a little bit underdeveloped. Beyond being the manager of the hotel, Yaz's mum didn't actually have much else to do, and if I was being cynical, I'd say that Dr. McIntyre was only there to spout out exposition. Even Robertson, beyond being a Trump caricature, didn't play a massive role in the story. Having said all that, these characters weren't bad guest characters. I did like them, and it'd be interesting to see Yaz's mum, and Dr. McIntyre in particular, be developed further in future episodes. By contrast, a real standout element of the episode for me was the scenes back in Graham's house where he saw visions of Grace. It's become quite a trope in TV for characters to see ghost-like apparitions of their deceased loved ones. Doctor Who has done it before with Clara in Heaven Sent, and Sherlock too in The Lying Detective. However, the episode didn't just use this as a cliché. Great emphasis was placed on the simple details of Graham's grief, such as returning to his house for the first time in a while, smelling Grace's coats, wishing he could talk to her and tell her all about his adventures. I really appreciate that 3 episodes on, Grace's death is still having an impact on the show and its characters, instead of just being a throwaway plot device from the first episode. It makes Graham seem like a very real character. It's also a nice touch that Graham chooses to continue travelling with the Doctor because of his grief and because of Grace's death. Arachnids in the UK was, overall, a pretty fun episode in my eyes, despite its flaws. I had a few issues with the script, but they didn't have too much of a bearing on my enjoyment of the episode. The spiders were realised very effectively thanks to some convincing CGI work, though arguably the real villain of the piece was Robertson, a ridiculously camp but sort of entertaining caricature of Donald Trump. The plot was nothing too strenuous or complicated, simple enough to be accessible to a wide audience, but with the political subtext there for those that want it. There were some standout moments, such as Graham struggling to cope with grief, and the TARDIS team establishing themselves properly at the episode's end, but on the whole, I think this was probably the weakest instalment of Series 11 so far. That's not to say it was a bad episode though. It was nothing too groundbreaking or classic, but still a very solid slice of Doctor Who. And before I draw this video to a close, here are some random thoughts about the episode that I couldn't fit into my main review. The new vortex introduced in this episode was a pleasant surprise, and like the opening titles, it is absolutely gorgeous. I love how colourful, vibrant and psychedelic it is. And I thought it was a nice touch how the swirling patterns are sort of reminiscent of a Van Gogh painting. Once again, I thought the direction was one of the strongest aspects of this episode. The opening sequence of low-angled shots, as if from the point of view of a spider, was a real highlight for me. It establishes an eerie tone right from the off, and it's a nice touch that the final shot of this sequence shows us our first view of Robertson. As well as functioning as a spider point of view shot, the low angle hints to the audience that Robertson is a powerful and intimidating character. I also really like the transitions between scenes, from the tram that wipes across the screen to reveal the TARDIS landing in Sheffield, to the Doctor's map diagram merging into a shot of the hotel it represents. They look slick and worked really well. I love the Doctor's social awkwardness in this episode. From preparing to say goodbye to her new friends, to trying to do small talk at Yaz's, to getting confused about Ed Sheeran, this is exactly how the Doctor should be. Jodie keeps getting better and better in the role. This episode was definitely her best yet, in my opinion. The show is continuing to explore the theme of family, with this episode showing us Yasmin's family for the first time, and providing us with further hints about Ryan's dad. The scenes with Ryan and Graham pose an interesting question that I believe will be significant later in the series. What does family, actually mean? Ryan notes that, although his dad is his proper dad, as in there's a blood link there and he's related to him, there's nothing proper about him in terms of his behaviour. You certainly get the impression that Graham is more of a father figure to him than his dad ever was, and perhaps Ryan is starting to realise that. We're almost certainly going to meet Ryan's dad in a future episode, so I'm looking forward to that. It's the TARDIS team, however, that is once again endorsed as the show's main family. Despite there being no blood links between the Doctor, Graham, Ryan and Yaz, they are, in every other sense of the word, a family, having bonded together over these first 4 episodes. This is reaffirmed by the touching TARDIS scene at the end, in which they all actually decide to keep on travelling with each other, and pull the lever together, leading into their next adventure. So that does it for this review. I'd love to know what you thought of Arachnids in the UK, so please post your thoughts and mini-reviews in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for my review of the Tsuranga Conundrum. The Tsuranga Conundrum? I think that's how you pronounce it. So yeah, I'll see you then.